Hi, I'm Ariana Rusa.
And I'm Zach Stillwell.
And I'm Nathan Hill.
Today we're going to diagram sentences. Now let's all put on our thinking caps.
The first sentence that we are going to diagram today is NBA players work extremely hard and devote most of their lives to be excellent athletes. So when we go to diagram a sentence, the first thing we want to look for are prepositional phrases. A good way to remember what a prepositional phrase is to know that you can do it to a box. So anything you can do to a box is considered a prepositional phrase. So as we look through our sentence, we read NBA players work extremely hard and devote most of their lives to be excellent athletes. We can see that of their lives, because of a box, or of their lives is our prepositional phrase. So we're going to do a parenthesis around of and after lives. The next thing we're going to look for are verbs. The way you can tell if it's a verb is because it's an action that's taking place. So as we read through the sentence, we can see that work, devotes, and to be are all verbs. So we're going to underline all of the following. So we're going to underline work, devote, and to be. All identified as a verb. After we identify all the verbs, we're going to move on to finding the subject or the subjects. So as we read through the sentence, we can see that the subjects are players. So we're going to box all of our subjects. So we're going to box players. And then we can also see that theirs, or there, is also a subject. So we're going to box that as well. Once we've identified the subjects, we're going to move on to the objects. And the objects are not the subject, but they're related to the subject. And that's how we can remember how to decipher what is an object pertaining to the subject. So as we look through, we can see that the objects are athletes. And we're going to put a kind of an oval around that one, kind of like a circle, to identify athletes. So if we look and see if there's any other objects, we know that there's not, because there's nothing that's related to the subject like athletes was. Next, we're going to move to trying to identify conjunctions, which a conjunction links two statements together. And some of the most common conjunctions are and, but, or so. So if we read through the sentence, do we see any of these? Yes, we do. We see and so we're going to draw a diamond around and to identify that. After we identify all of the conjunctions, we can move on to try and find the apostrophes. And as we read through the sentence, we can see that there are no apostrophes needed or there. So we can move on now to pronouns. And pronouns are what replace nouns. So as we look through pronoun, we can see that there takes the place of players, and players is a noun. Therefore, we're going to highlight there, because there replaces players, and we're going to highlight players because then we can tell what replaces what, which is there replaces players. After we find the pronouns and the nouns that they replace and we highlight them, we're going to look for dependent clauses. And a dependent clause is a clause that can only stand with another statement so that it's not a fragment, so that it makes sense. So as we read through the sentence, we can see that the dependent clause starts with devote and it ends at athletes, because devote most of their lives to be excellent athletes is an incomplete sentence, therefore it's a dependent clause. And so we are going to put brackets around devote and athletes. So now we can identify that that is a dependent clause. Once we go through our dependent clauses, we're going to look for adverbs, which adverbs usually end in ly, and they describe the verb that's being done. So as we look through, an indicator of an adverb is the ly. So as we scan the sentence, we can see that the ly is here underneath extremely. So we're going to double underline this to identify it as an adverb. After we identify that as an adverb, we have completed the diagramming of the sentence.
Alright guys, so the second sentence that we're going to be diagramming today is the one you see right here. It reads, organizational communication is an important class and it teaches you how to behave in the workplace. So like that first sentence we went through, we want to go through our elements in order. The first one you want to look for is prepositional phrases. And like Zach was explaining earlier, one of the ways you identify prepositional phrases is by what you can do to a box. Anything you can do to a box. So in this particular case, as we read through this, the first one you're going to see is going to be in the workplace. What we're going to do is we're going to put parentheses around there so we can cordon that off and make sure we don't have to worry about it as we diagram the rest of the sentence. Reading through it, we don't see any more, so we move on to our second element, which is going to be verbs. Verbs you identify as kind of an action or something that's happening in the sentence, and in this one we have 3. The first one we're going to see is going to be is, so we want to underline that. Second one we see is teaches, I'm going to underline that as well, and the last one is going to be to behave. That one's a little bit tricky, but for the sake of argument, we're just going to call it a verb, just to make sure that we don't have to worry about it later. Looking through, we don't have any more verbs, so the third element we go on to is going to be subjects. For the sake of argument, this time we're going to call organizational communication, our lovely class, one singular subject. So we're going to put a box around that. And then after looking through that, the second subject we're going to see is going to be down here. It's going to be it. Looking through the sentence, we don't have any more subjects. We got them all down. So the fourth element we're going to look at is objects. Now, the best way you can remember what an object is would be it's something that's not really the subject, but usually has to do with it. So when we're looking at this one, the first one you're going to see is going to be class. It's describing, in a way, organizational communication. And then the second one we're going to be looking at is you, because in that second part of the sentence, who is being taught, it's you. We don't have any more objects, so we want to move on to our fifth element. That's going to be adverbs. For this one, we only have one to worry about. That's going to be and right over here. So we're going to put a diamond around that one to identify that as an adverb. Looking through, we don't have any more, so we go to our sixth element, which is apostrophes. Luckily, as you read through this sentence, we don't need any and we don't have any to begin with, so we don't have to worry about that. As we go to our last one, we're going to be looking for pronouns and the nouns that they replace. So for this one, we're going to be looking at it primarily first, which is substituting organizational communication. And the second one we're going to be looking at is you, as it is describing it would otherwise be you. Substitute your name. So after that, we don't have any more pronouns, so we're going to move on to dependent clauses. Now in this particular case, we don't actually have dependent clauses, but we do in fact have 2 independent clauses. You can see organizational communication is an important class. That all could be read as one sentence, so we don't have to worry about that. Then we also have it teaches you how to behave in the workplace. Not the most eloquent thing, but also again, it is an independent clause. You could put that just as its own singular sentence. So we don't have to worry about any brackets around anything here. Moving on, we go to our ninth element, which is going to be adverbs, which are commonly identified, typically, by an ly at the end. Again, in this particular case, we do not have any of those. We're not going to have to worry about double underlining those. And then the last one we have is going to be homonyms that we would be looking at. So the only homonym that we can see right here is going to be to. So for the sake of this, we're going to put a little tiny bit of an arrow around there. Now, technically speaking, this is part of the infinitive that we are counting as a verb, but in case you did not count this as a verb, you can put an arrow around that just to remind yourself. And that, my friends, would be our second sentence fully diagrammed.
For the third sentence that we are going to diagram, we have the sentence, for my birthday, I want to skydive out of an airplane and enjoy time with family. The sentence is great. It shows versatility. You enjoy action and adrenaline, but at the same time, you're very domesticated. So, we start off with the prepositional phrases. Now, for my birthday is a prepositional phrase, so we'll go ahead and put parentheses around that. Out of an airplane, also a prepositional phrase. And we have one more at the end, which is with family. Now that we have our prepositional phrases out of the way, we can identify the verbs. So we have want, as well as enjoy, and the infinitive that we count as a verb, to skydive. Then we can get the subjects from the sentence, or at least the subject, which is I. And we have our object here as time. And then last but certainly not least, we have our conjunction, and. So we'll put a diamond around and. And there you have it.